Yeah.
Praise the Lord, everybody.
Praise the Lord.
Amen. Good to be here. Happy Father's Day to all of the fathers. Amen. It's just a blessing to have a father. And I honor you today in your position as fathers. So we are just blessed of the Lord to be here. Say amen for Sister Sue coming in. Looking all lovely. It is just a blessing to be here, and we're going to open up our Bibles to the book of Ezra. Ezra, the 4th chapter is where we're going, and it has been just a great study as we've ended the captivity stage, and already now we are into the return stage. And so we thank God for blessing us, and we thank God for the distance that we have come. So when we talked last Sunday, we began to talk about the return stage, and we talked about the book of Ezra in the context of talking about how it shows us God's providence. So does anybody remember what we said about God's providence, what that meant? Anybody?
God's way of working things out.
God's way of working things out. God's way of working things out. Excuse me. And we said that you could actually, one great example of God's providence in the Bible is the story of Joseph, how God worked all of that out. So within God's providence, Pastor Bland, you can also see God's sovereignty, how God does everything the way he wants to do everything. And he does that in order so that his purpose will be done.
Let me ask you something, teacher. Why is it that you think that it really bothers us when the way things go? Like if things don't go the way we want them to go, what do you think that is?
I think that is just our makeup as a human being, that we have, what we want to do is we want to be in control of things. We want to be in control of things, and then when we're not in control of things, we don't yield to God in that respect. Because I hear you say so often, God doesn't need our help, but what we try to do is help him out. And so it just that's the human nature. It's a human nature. They have a whole big course, a whole big study on the human element. When you add in the human element to things, it changes the whole course of things. It absolutely does. It absolutely does. Pastor Bland? Okay, thank you so much. And so what we talked about, opening this up, how in the return stage, it wasn't going to be just as easy as returning. Wasn't going to be as easy as returning because they were going to be met with opposition. And how many of you know that when something is opposed to what you're trying to do, or opposed to your train of thought, or opposed to your ability, conflict will arise. Conflict will arise. And so, and I guess I've already said it, so just in your natural life, what causes conflict? In your natural life?
Everything.
Like what?
Anything that don't go the way I want it to go.
Anything that doesn't go the way you want it to go. Curtis, what causes conflict in your life?
Yeah, my personal.
Your
Personal thought process.
okay, family. Anything that comes up any different. If you have a difference in opinion, right? Like we live in a house together. If we have a difference in opinion, if we don't come to some kind of an agreement, that's conflict.
Well, usually we don't have no difference of opinion because there ain't but one opinion that counts. That's yours. So, I mean.
Right. Yeah. Well, you know what? I'm gonna give you a pass on that.
All right. So you teach you that.
Yeah, I'm gonna give you a pass on that. If you have a difference in interest, let's go back to me and you again. So, like if we are going out, we might go shopping or something, and I want to look at all the clothes. I want to go shoe shopping, but you have no interest in that. But I want you to stay there. There's a conflict. It's a conflict. This is just a natural conflict. If you have different communication styles, you communicate differently, then sometimes that causes a conflict. So then, conflict most of the time is unwelcome. Unwelcome, but how many even know that a lot of times conflict is necessary? It's necessary, and it's unavoidable. We try to run away from it. We try to ignore it a lot of times, and if you do, that causes more conflict. Causes more conflict. And so people handle conflict in a lot of different ways. Like I said, you might try to ignore it, but that won't make it go away because you ignore it, will it? It will not make it go away. When a conflict arises in a lot of cases, sometimes it causes us to become angry. And we react by getting loud and boisterous. We react to it in different ways, but that does not cause it to go away. It stays right there. So we're in Ezra, the 4th chapter. So I want you to turn there with me. Ezra, the 4th chapter. And for this lesson, we're going to do Ezra, the 4th chapter, verses 1 through 5 rather, and then go to verse 24. So I'll wait and let you get there. Remember, Ezra is right after 2 Chronicles.
Glad you said something. I was looking for it in the Mount of Prophets. You said the 4th chapter?
Ezra 4, verses 1 through 5. And so as you're turning there again, Ezra, in this book of Ezra, is going to show us how Israel was still God's people, even though they were, coming over from Babylon out of captivity. And it shows that God had not forgotten about them. Again, it shows God's providence, his governance of all things, how God works in all things, and within his providence is his sovereignty. And within that, it shows us the meaning of Romans 8:28. And I'm finding out that meaning more and more and more the older I get. I'm finding out the true meaning of Romans 8 and 28. And so a lot of times when we talk about God's providence and God's sovereignty, do you know that sometimes when God blesses you, the blessings come from the most unlikely place? You believe that?
Yeah.
Have you ever experienced that? You've been blessed and sometimes and from people and from situations that you never thought you would have, and you never even would have looked that way. But the blessings come. And so in Ezra, the 4th chapter, let's begin reading there. Well, I'll ask you to read, Pastor Bland.
Okay. Now, when the adversaries of Judah and Benjamin heard that the children of the captivity builded the temple unto the Lord God of Israel, then they came to Zerubbabel and to the chief of the fathers and said unto them, Let us build with you, for we seek your God as you do. And we do sacrifice unto him since the days of Esarhaddon, king of Ashur, which brought us up hither.
Okay, you can stop right there. Okay, let's stop right there and talk first about the adversaries. And then it says here that the adversaries, all they had to do was they heard that they had come to build the temple. So we have the children of Israel who's on a mission. They're on a mission. And the mission is they left Babylon and they're headed back to Jerusalem to build the temple. Remember, Jerusalem is where the center of worship was for the children of Israel, and the temple was the center for them to worship. And so that was their mission. They went back with a goal in mind. But how many of you know that the devil doesn't care that you got a mission? As a matter of fact, that's when he want to work with you. When you got a mission, when you got your mind made up, that's just when he wants to come in to deter you and to distract you from the mission that God has given you. And so the adversaries here in this verse, when we talk about the adversaries, those are those descendants that came from intermarriages, and we'll go over to 2 Kings in just a minute, between Israelites who were left in the land of Assyria, who took the northern kingdom. If you remember, that's where the northern kingdom, when Assyria came in and took them into captivity. And then those foreigners who were planted or transplanted there, their offspring became known as the Samaritans. And so let's go over to 2 Kings, the 17th chapter, because as we go down, Pastor Blaine, go ahead and read verse 3.
But Zerubbabel and Jeshua and the rest of the chief of the fathers of Israel said unto them, You have nothing to do with us to bring an house unto our God, to build an house unto our God. But we ourselves together will build unto the Lord God of Israel, as King Cyrus the king of Persia have commanded us.
Okay, stop right there. Okay, so up in verse 2, they said, come on, we want to build with you. Let us build with you, for we seek your God. We seek your God as ye do, and we do sacrifice unto him, which was partly true. It was partly true. But let's go over to 2 Kings, and let's go to 2 Kings, the 17th chapter. Second Kings 17, and we'll start at the 24th verse. Are you there? Mm-hmm. And the king of Assyria brought men from Babylon and from Cuthah and from Ava or Avah and from Hamath and from Sepharvaim, and placed them in the cities of Samaria instead of the children of Israel. And they possessed Samaria and dwelt in the cities thereof. And so it was at the beginning of their dwelling there that they feared not the Lord. Therefore the Lord sent lions among them, which slew some of them. Wherefore they spake to the king of Assyria, saying, The nations which thou hast removed and placed in the cities of Samaria know not the manner of the God of the land. Therefore he hath sent lions among them, and behold, they slay them, because they know not the manner of the God of the land. Then the king of Assyria commanded, saying, Carry thither one of the priests whom ye brought from thence, and let them go and dwell there, and let him teach them the manner of the God of the land. Then one of the priests whom they had carried away from Samaria came and dwelt in Bethel, and taught them how they should fear the Lord. Howbeit, every nation made gods of their own, and put them in the houses of the high places which the Samaritans had made, every nation in their cities wherein they dwelt. Look at verse 33. They feared the Lord and served their own gods, after the manner of the nations whom they carried away from thence. Look at verse 41. So these nations feared the Lord and served their graven images, both their children and their children's children, as did their fathers, so do they unto this day. And so go back over to Ezra. So, they came as adversaries. They came in opposition to what the children of Israel were trying to do. And they came with partly a lie. We serve God just like you do, but that wasn't true. And Zerubbabel them, since they had their mind made up, look, that's what got us into trouble in the first place. That got us into trouble in the first place. If we let you come in and mix up with us, yes, you're going to throw us off task. This is not what God has intended. God gave us the command. And so this is what we want to do, and we don't want you to have any part of it. Pastor Blaine?
So then, is the bottom line in all of this is that you are to trust God?
Trust God,
Trust
absolutely.
God. And without faith, it's impossible to please Him. And also, I guess, as an offshoot of it is that you can't trust God and trust something else.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of like being saved, or being saved. We are told to believe the gospel, believe that the death, burial, and resurrection is sufficient to reconcile us with God. But then Satan throws in, you got to do that and pay your tithes, and add some things to it. And you trust in those as well as trusting in God. Because, I mean, the people who mix law and grace, I don't think any of them would say, well, you don't trust God, or you don't trust the death, burial, and resurrection, but then they say, and add. So I kind of got that out of what you were saying.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Pastor Blaine. Anybody else? Anybody else have a comment about that? And so, Pastor Blaine, read verse 4. We're in Ezra chapter 4, verse 4.
Then the people of the land weakened the hands of the people of Judah and troubled them in building, and hired counselors against them to frustrate their purpose all the days of Cyrus, king of Persia, even until the reign of Darius, king of Persia.
Okay, you can stop right there. Okay, so if he doesn't get you one way, he'll try to get you another way. Okay? So the point being here is, don't get comfortable. Don't get comfortable thinking that the way is already made. Okay, all I got to do is just walk right in, and it's just, don't get comfortable in thinking that. You always have to have a spirit of discernment, and you always have to have a spirit of, I'm going on no matter what. Pastor Blaine?
I guess I'm asking you the same question I asked you to start with, is why is it that we faint so easily, that you just trust in God? Cast away our confidence.
Well, you know what? Because we again, we're human, and as humans, we have fears. And then, the devil knows that and plays into our fears. And so here, when you're talking about why, it was a lot to go up against. You have to think about it. They come back to a situation where they're basically in the minority. And then as being in the minority, they come back with a purpose. The purpose is to build a temple worthy of worship to God. And so you come back to basically a hostile place, hostile people, hostile inhabitants. And so the people of the land weaken. What did they do? We talked about last Sunday, a discouraged saint. And how that is one of the worst things you can be as a believer, is to become discouraged. So they weaken their hand, they dishearten them, they weaken in this context mean to relax, abandon, withdraw. And then it says, and troubled them. And so this is what caused them to just give up. They troubled them, they disturbed them, they made them nervous, they caused them to be anxious, they used fear tactics to cause them to hinder the work. So they hired counselors to influence the local officials to stop the project. They lied on them. They hired them to frustrate their purpose, to frustrate. When you frustrate something in this context, it means to break, it means to make void, it means to defeat, it means to disannul, it means to disappoint, it means to come to naught, break asunder, and cause to cease, which is what they did. Read for me, Pastor Bland, verse 24. Ezra 4 and verse 24.
Then ceased the work of the house of God, which is at Jerusalem. So it ceased until the 2nd year of the reign of Darius, king of Persia.
Okay, so as you see, chapters 4, verses 1 through 5 go together, and then you skip all of that in between and go to chapter 24, and that goes together. So they came to verse 24, I'm sorry, and that goes together. So we'll come back to the verses in between later on, because that refers to verses 6 through 23 refer to the rebuilding of the city, not the rebuilding of the temple. So verses 1 through 5 and verse 24 refer to the building of the temple. So when they came and frustrated their purpose, they caused them to cease. The building on the temple stopped after they came in and caused such a havoc. So verse 24, this was during the reign of Cyrus. And remember, Cyrus was the one who gave that first edict for them to come back and rebuild the land and rebuild the temple. And so they got off to a really good start. They got off to a real good start. They had fervor. They were excited. They were determined. They had initiative. They were just set on, we're going to do what we set out to do. But it's not so much how you start, Pastor Bland. It's how you finish. And so they had trouble all along the way. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it was easy. As I said, as we started out, it was hard when they came back. It was a hard thing. Pastor Bland?
How do you finish? Since so many don't finish, so many, the word that I heard this morning was consistency. How do you be consistent?
The only way you can is to keep going. You keep going. Now, you may have to, along the way, you started out strong, and in the middle, between starting and finishing, you might have to start taking some baby steps. You may have to start taking, but you will never get to the end if you stop. So you have to, Brother Herman, even when you're faced with opposition, even when things come up against you, you may want to sit down, and you might sit down. You might sit down for just a little while, but you got to get up and keep moving. You just got to keep going in order for you to finish. And so they feared the people of the land, and then the work stopped. Fear is a great tactic. Sometimes it's a great motivator, and sometimes it is good, and it makes you just stop in your tracks. Fear will paralyze you a lot of times. And so you have to, it's dependent upon you how you react to what has caused the fear. And so they stopped. I mean, they just stopped, they stopped building. And so God had to arouse them. So a lot of times when you stop doing something, you become complacent. You get complacent. You know what complacency is? And we use this term a lot, and sometimes, we need to be careful about it, because sometimes it just keeps lulling us into a place of more complacency. We say it is what it is. And sometimes when we say it is what it is, that means if it is what it is, we're not going to do anything to try to do anything different.
Like Lady Deborah, you can see that because people always have excuses. We, as human beings, we always got an excuse why. But one thing about it is when folks was coming to church, you always had the same people late. Something ain't happening every week. Every service, something is not happening. That's complacency. That's because of just complacency. And we're human beings, and like I say, ain't a damn worth of difference between us, that's how we are as human beings. But I think, this I speak for myself, Robert, the only insurance I have of not falling into what everybody else falls into is humility. It's humility. Because when you're wrong, God always sends you somebody to show you. And if you talked about this the other night at the meeting, when somebody says something to you, if you got a reason why they don't know what they're talking about, then you don't never get no help. At least listen. Have enough humility to listen. And to me, that's the only hope you got. Because then you can get grace, because he gives grace to the humble.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree with that. Anybody else? Anybody else have a comment or you want to add to that? And so, that's a good segue into this. So you become complacent. Complacency simply means that you're satisfied. You're satisfied, and, I can just look at myself about so many things, about things that I have become satisfied with. And so you're satisfied, then you're satisfied in your own abilities or the situation, whatever the situation is. And then when you become satisfied, it prevents you from moving forward, or it prevents you from trying something harder. I can remember it took me years and years and years before I ever went back to get my master's. Because first of all, I was satisfied, and then I'm thinking, I can't do that. I'm just satisfied, I can't do that. But then when I finally made up my mind, I'm thinking in my mind, oh, this is not as hard as I thought it was. I was preventing myself from moving forward all this time, And so God will, though, and in this instance, he did. God will send someone in your path to arouse you from your complacency, but you have to listen. You have to listen. And God, being God, he raised up some preachers. He raised up some preachers at this time to arouse them from their complacency. And at this time, this is the time that Haggai and Zechariah came on the scene. So they stopped building the temple. What you said you came over here to do. You told the people at the beginning, no, we could build this temple on our own. God stirred up the heart of somebody that didn't even know God, stirred up the heart of Cyrus to send them back. So it wasn't the fact that Cyrus said, you got to stop. It wasn't the fact she said that. They made up in their own mind after fear set in on them. They just shut it down. They shut it down. Okay, so God raised up Haggai and Zechariah. And for that, during this period, let's go to the book of Haggai. And let's go to the first chapter. It is hard to find. It's right after Zephaniah. It's between Zephaniah and Zechariah. And it's a very short book. It's only a couple of chapters. Yeah, so they stopped focusing on the house of God. It was of some 16 years or so. You have to look, and when you read in the Bible, a lot of times if you go from one verse to another verse, it seems like it was just a few minutes, or it seems like it might have been just a year or so. But no, when the building ceased, it ceased for a long time.
I have in my notes 16 years.
16 years. And so during that time, they stopped focusing on their initial goal, and they started focusing on their own stuff. They started focusing on their own houses. Okay, so in Haggai, the first chapter, the first verse says, in the second year of Darius, so we have a change of leadership. In the second year of Darius the king, in the 6th month, in the first day of the month, came the word of the Lord by Haggai the prophet unto Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, governor of Judah, and to Joshua, the son of Josedek, the high priest, saying, thus speaketh the Lord of hosts, saying, this people say, the time is not come, the time that the Lord's house should be built. Let's stop right there. So now they changed their tune a little bit here and said, now they came over with Zerubbabel to build the temple, but now you say the time is not right. How can that be? You make up in your mind that it's not the right time. When God had it all worked out, God said, no, it's time for you to go back. It's time for you to rebuild.
Lady Deborah, something just came to me, and that is, we become discouraged when we're dependent upon ourselves. You come to your, I'm tired. When you depend upon yourself, but as long as you're dependent upon God, you can make it. But when you're dependent upon yourself, and that's a lesson that I have to learn over and over and over and over again. I become discouraged. I become disappointed in myself. And then, it comes that, you're not supposed to be dependent on yourself anyway. You're not your own. You bought with a price. You've been crucified with Christ, and now it's Him. It's the greater that's within. But that is a lesson. I can't speak for anybody else, but that's a lesson that I have to learn over and over and over again. I become disappointed. And why am I disappointed? I'm disappointed because I was trusting in myself.
Absolutely.
God never disappoints.
Absolutely. And when you do that, you'll be disappointed every time. So the only way is because you walked around with confidence in your ability, you walked around in confidence in your intelligence, you walked around in confidence in your bank account, and all of that is nothing but a disappointment.
And it seems like success is a double-edged sword, because on one side, for your success, you're like, look at God, look what God has done. But then when God switches up on you, then you start feeling like, man, I must be doing something wrong. It ain't, no, it's just a different season.
A different season. And really, what you have to do is you have to be able to transition to the different season. If you don't have the ability, if you're not willing to switch and transition into the different season, you will get stuck and you'll get disappointed again, and you won't keep moving.
And I have to realize that God haven't changed. The situation may have changed, the outlook may have changed, but God, He's the same God. He hasn't lost any strength. He hasn't lost any influence. He hadn't lost anything. It's just I'm walking by sight.
Yeah. Yeah.
And not by faith.
Yeah. Oh, I got my message already. I could go on back home. I could truly go back home, and I'm asking God, help me to be able to switch. Help me to be able to walk into a different season. Because, if you live, and, my mom's getting ready to be 89 years old tomorrow. Is her 89th birthday, and only, you have to go from those 89 years, only imagine the number of seasons that she's gone through. And what if she hadn't been able to switch up, to transition between the seasons? Think about your own life. Think about your own life and the things that's happened to you in the time that you've been here, the different seasons that you've gone through in your life. The only reason that you're sitting here this morning with any amount of sense that you have is because first God allowed it, and then you were able to change up and walk in the transition that you had. The seasons are different. The seasons don't stay the same. That's one thing we got to get in mind. You're not going to be where you are today in a couple of years from now. You're going to look back over this. When you move on, you're going to look back over this and say, Lord, thank you for bringing me through that season. The seasons, you got to be able to change, Pastor Blaine. You got to be able to go with the seasons. That's the only way you can be success. That's real success. Being able to go with the seasons.
That's the reason the old saints used to just say, yes, Lord. Yes, Lord. Yes to your will, yes to your way. Then they would say, use me, Lord, and you'll say, any way you use me. Any way you use me.
And I'm telling you, I tell you, it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good because some seasons are hard.
They're hard.
Some seasons are hard. Some seasons are filled with losses. Some seasons are filled with heartache and tears. But God will bring you through it. God will bring you through it. Some season you up on the mountain. You up on the mountain. Look like everything you touch, everything you go to do, it's just everything is just working, and you just walking along skipping and kicking cans. And then other seasons look like every morning you wake up with tears in your eyes. But God is able to bring you through. He's the same God. He is the same God.
And you know, Lady Deborah, that's the reason that Jesus it has to be our joy. Not the circumstances, but Jesus has to be our joy. I have to, let me just speak for myself. I have to keep my eyes on him. And like I said, that's a challenge for me.
Yes. Yeah, it is a challenge.
That's a challenge for all of us. But I have to keep my eyes on him. And once once I can fasten my eyes upon him, it's all right. It's all right, you know. But I guess it's just like a car. I don't care what kind of car that you buy. Sooner or later, it's going to need an alignment. Just pulling to the left or pulling to the right, you know. And sometimes I get so busy, I know it needs something. You know what I mean? And next thing I do is I don't wore out a pair of tires. All I had to do was get it lined up, you know.
Absolutely. And God is the same God. You know, it's just like here, they took their eyes off of God. They took their eyes off God and said, you know what? The time is not right. The timing is not right. And the people came, it just must not be the right time. And so the prophet came on the scene. The prophet said, well, if it's not the right time for you to build a temple, I guess you're telling me it's the right time for you to check on your own stuff. And so in verse 4, he says, is it time for you, O ye, to dwell in your sealed houses, and this house lie waste? Now, therefore, thus saith the Lord of hosts, consider your ways. I'm in Haggai, the 1st chapter, the 5th verse. Consider your ways. You've sown much and bring in little. This is what they took their eyes off God. And God said, this is what's happening. You're doing all you can for yourself, and you're not getting anywhere. You're not making any progress. And you don't understand the connection in that. He says, you've sown much and bring in little. Ye eat, but ye have not enough. Ye drink, but ye are not filled with drink. Ye clothe you, but there is none warm. And he that earneth wages to put it into a bag with holes. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, consider your ways. Go up to the mountain and bring wood and build the house, and I will take pleasure in it, and I will be glorified, said the Lord. Ye looked for much, and lo, it came to little. And when you brought it home, I did blow upon it. Why? Why, said the Lord of hosts? Because of mine house that is waste, and ye run every man into his own house. Therefore the heaven over you is stayed from dew, and the earth is stayed from her fruit. And I called for a drought upon the land, and upon the mountains, and upon the corn, and upon the new wine, and upon the oil, and upon that which the ground bringeth forth, and upon men, and upon cattle, and upon all the labor of the land. So God used them. God used above all the labor of the hand. Thank you. And so God used the preachers to arouse them from their complacency. So let's go back over to Ezra. Let's go back over to Ezra, and then let's go to Ezra, the 5th chapter.
So Lady Deborah, would you agree with this? Because, I mean, I think it's just inevitable that you're going to get off. That my prayer should be, Lord, keep my heart. Keep me with a heart that will receive when I get wrong. Don't let me get a proud heart. Don't let me get a stony heart where you can't choose. Maybe that's a reprobate mind when I get to the place where no matter who it is or whatever, you know, I'm just set on my ways.
Absolutely. We're going back to Ezra, and we're going to chapter 5. So in Ezra chapter 5, we just read Haggai. Do you have something?
No, I was going to read.
Okay. Yeah, I do. Ezra chapter 5, and let's just start at verse 1.
Then the prophets, Haggai the prophet, and Zechariah the son of Iddo, prophesied unto the Jews that were in Judah and Jerusalem in the name of the God of Israel, even unto them. Then rose up Zerubbabel the son of Shealtiel, and Jeshua the son of Josadak, and began to build the house of God which is at Jerusalem. And with them were the prophets of God, helping them.
Stop right there, but you can keep the mic. Just what we just read in Haggai, where he went back and aroused them. And so they went back. They got a new determination that we're going to go on and do what God tasked us to do. So we're gonna go back. But again, even though you got a mind, the devil is still on his job. Okay? So you still have to be aware that you have a job, and then there's opposition to the job that you have. It's going to always be opposition. It's going to be ever present. But I believe many times that even though we have opposition, we have conflict, that we can turn that around into opportunity. Do you think that?
Lady Deborah, I think this is when, whenever God has something, the devil always has a counterfeit for it. And basically what this was a revival. And so the church has come up with what they call a revival. The problem with it is that any time that it is dependent upon what you do, it's not going to come to anything. So they come in and they get you to make up your mind and this fervor, and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, and you last only for a short time. Then you become guilty and you become despondent because I didn't hold to what I said. When a true revival is just simply believe in God. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Because my faith wavers. Mm-hmm, God has said something, and I'm supposed to do it. When I take God at his word, that's faith, and that's what pleases God. But when I start wavering, and then like what you said at the beginning, I never thought about this. I believe God, but I'm going to do this over here as well, you see. But I think a true revival is in an individual who has got rid of all other options. Whatever God said. I don't care. And, people try to make you, it's still peer pressure. I'm 64 years old.
Absolutely.
When we were kids, they was talking about peer pressure, how people, get you to go do things and all this, right? But I'm 64, still got peer pressure.
Yes.
You still got folks that they're gonna, push you aside, ostracize you if you don't go along with what, you see what I'm saying? But I think a true revival is when I get to the place where, you can push me aside, you can talk about me, you can do whatever you want to do. I'm going to listen to God.
Yeah, that's a good point. You still have peer pressure, and you still have bullies, even and the bullies seem like they get worse, the older you get.
Now we got a president.
Absolutely, an absolute bully. And so, Pastor Bland, read verse 3.
At the same time came to them Tatniah, governor on this side the river, and Shethar-Boznai and their companions, and said thus unto them, Who have commanded you to build this house and to make up this wall? Then said we unto them after this manner, What are the names of the men that make this building?
Okay, you can stop right there. Okay, so now as governor, he was doing his job. Okay, because now remember, they're coming in. You still have to look at things were still political. Okay, so he is governor, but he's protecting the interests of King Darius. So he's coming in because now the temple has been lying there, just sitting there. They put up a foundation. That's about it. They built an altar and a foundation, but that was about it. For 16 years, it had just been there. So now they come back, and they start building, and he's, making his rounds and everything, and he want to know where y'all come from and who told y'all to do this.
And that just reminds me of is that when you get to the place, most of us, it takes us a long time to get to the place where we believe God. And then people are going to question you.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. So you was a drunk last week, now you're preaching. And you got to have enough humility to take that, like you said.
Absolutely, absolutely. Humility goes a long way. And so now they got a different attitude. They got a different attitude after the preachers came and told them, y'all need to get up and get about your business. Verse 5 says, but the eye of their God was upon the elders of the Jews, that they could not cause them to cease till the matter came to Darius, and then they returned, answer by letter concerning this matter. So the Jews, they knew their history. They knew told them how they knew why the temple was built and how the temple was built, and then the temple got destroyed. So they told them, we're servants of the God. We're servants of the God. We're servants of the Most High God, rather. We are the servants of God. Look at verse 11. Ezra 5 and verse 11. And thus they returned us answer, saying, we are the servants of the God of heaven and earth, and build the house that was builded these many years ago, which a great king of Israel builded and set up. But after that our fathers had provoked the God of heaven unto wrath. He gave them into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, the Chaldean, who destroyed this house and carried the people away into Babylon. But in the first year of Cyrus, the king of Babylon, the same King Cyrus made a decree to build this house of God. And the vessels also of gold and silver of the house of God, which Nebuchadnezzar took out of the temple that was in Jerusalem, and brought them into the temple of Babylon. Those did Cyrus the king take out of the temple of Babylon, and they were delivered unto one whose name was Sheshbazzar, whom he had made governor, and said unto him, take these vessels, go carry them into the temple that is in Jerusalem, and let the house of God be builded. Then came the name Sheshbazzar, the same Sheshbazzar, and laid the foundation of the house of God, which is in Jerusalem, and since that time, even until now, hath it been in building, and yet is not finished. Now therefore, if it seem good to the king, let there be search made in the king's treasure house, which is there at Babylon, whether it be so that a decree was made of Cyrus the king to build this house of God at Jerusalem, and let the king send his pleasure to us concerning this matter. And so we're going to stop right here and pick up next Sunday to show how a search of the archives was made and how this edit was found that caused them to continue the building. Give the Lord a hand praise, everybody.